Good afternoon to those who are watching us live today. My name is Alexandra Ozier, and I am a sophomore marketing student attending North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. This past summer, I was an intern for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's U.S. Africa Business Center through the 2021 Next Gen cohort. Being a member of the Next Generation program was truly a wonderful experience. The opportunities, conversations, and insight granted to me and the rest of my peers have been influential in the beginning of our professional journeys. Although the program is for minority students, I think it is safe to say that no one at the Chamber ever made us feel limited to those restrictions that some people have placed on us. It is no secret that there are racial disparities in the United States workforce, education system, justice system, and much more. The Equality of Opportunity Initiative, or the EOI, was launched by the Chamber in 2020 to address opportunity gaps that have continued to hinder the social, economic, and academic growth of Black people and people of color in the United States. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce continues to show initiative to combating the employment gap that hits Black Americans the hardest. According to a BLS current population survey, Black Americans make up roughly 12% of the workforce, but only 7.6% of the highest earners and 17% of the lowest earners. Thanks to the efforts of the Chamber and the Next Generation program, as well as the EOI initiative, we as a generation can move forward in breaking down these barriers and creating an equitable society that the generations after us can be proud of. We thank you all for tuning in to the conversation today, and I am pleased to announce and introduce Mr. Rick Wade, Senior Vice President of Strategic Alliances and Outreach at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as the next speaker. Rick, the screen is yours.
All right, thank you so much for the kind introduction. So proud of you and all of our Next Gen scholars for the tremendous work that you have been doing and continue to do. We're delighted that all of you have joined us for this Next Generation Town Hall, Amplifying Young and Informed Voices. I'm excited to have with us a good friend in conversation with Bret Hart, the President of United Airlines. Bret, welcome.
Thank you, Rick. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, it's good to see you. You know, Bret, every time I talk to you and see you, you always got a great smile. And like, no burdens at all. So I'm happy to see you again, man.
Yeah, life begins with positivity, man, no matter what the day brings, right?
There you go. So this Next Generation Town Hall, I mean, if you think about the thousands of young students across historically Black colleges and universities and other minority serving institutions, with all of the challenges that we're confronted in America, and that's what we've been taking on at the Chamber through our Equality of Opportunity Initiative, challenges like unemployment and wealth and criminal justice, education, et cetera. But Brett, the opportunity really is to hear from these young people, and that's what we're excited to have and hear from this afternoon. But I want to start with you because I think you have an amazing story growing up, I believe, in a small West Michigan town. So tell us a little about Bret Hart, your story, particularly your early years, for the benefit of this audience.
Yeah, happy to do that, Rick. Yeah, so I grew up in a town of about 1,500 people in the southwest corner of Michigan called Cassopolis. Despite where it was located, it was a remarkably diverse community. It used to be a stop on the Underground Railroad. So a lot of the families have been there for a very long time. Some of the oldest Black churches in the area. Just a wonderful place to grow up, small farming community. My father, his part-time job was the mayor of the town, and both my parents, although they did not have education beyond high school, both were small business owners, so it was a terrific place to grow up. Went on to school at Michigan undergrad. My dorm was larger than my hometown. And then on to Chicago. Spent a couple of years in DC at the U.S. Treasury Department. Came back, a partner in a law firm. Went on to become general counsel of the Sara Lee Corporation and joined United as the general counsel about a decade ago. Became the chief administrative officer and the acting CEO for 6 months as well, and then became president in May of 2020.
But what an extraordinary journey. And here's the deal. I mean, you were the first African American to become president of United Airlines, and I believe of a major airline. Period. Was that always part of the plan? I mean, we all get that question. What do you want to be when you grow up? Was it to be president of an airline?
Yeah, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It was never part of the plan. And I'm one of those people who makes 3 and 5 and 10-year plans, and this was never part of it. But I've been very fortunate to have a string of opportunities in my career. So look, as great as I feel about being in this role, and I know that there's a lot of pride in the African American community and with my family and the rest, that my being the first, it's also a little bit of a sad testament that it took almost 100 years for a Black person to become president of a major airline. But I and others are intently focused on making sure that I'm not the last.
Yeah, Brett, that's a really good point. I was watching an interview, Ross Brewer, who obviously is now president and CEO of Walgreens, and she's talked about breaking the concrete ceiling. And when you look at the data, I mean, the Wall Street Journal, there's an article that Black people hold 3% of executive or senior roles in companies with 100+ employees. Is that really the next tier? Is it really a concrete ceiling? Is that an accurate depiction, you think, when you think of corporate America and opportunities to move up the ladder?
Well, I mean, look, the numbers are what they are, and Roz is a great champion in this area, and is spot on in the way that she thinks about what we all have to do and what we've done to get to this point. But what I will tell you is that it is both about recruiting and in a better and more thoughtful way, but even over and above that, it's about development. And it's about promotional opportunities, and it's about stretch opportunities, and ensuring that we all have an opportunity to bring our best selves to these jobs. And when we do, and when that's what we're focused on, and bringing out the very best of our talents, then we succeed. We succeed in these roles. And so we have to be really deliberate about it. Because otherwise that ceiling, it's not quite glass, it's closer to concrete, but I think we all feel great that we can break through it, especially with this next generation of talent. We have some just amazing folks out there, and many of whom I'm sure are watching this video. These roles, should you choose to pursue them, are absolutely attainable. And we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do that.
And Brett, I'd be curious, because I think about my own career, which you've done better than me. I've never been any place more than 1 or 2 or 3 years. So it's but I think back about the importance of having role models and mentors, and I define that very loosely. But talk about how important it is, even within an organization like United, to have mentors and people who can help you navigate not just the tough realities of the job, but the challenges personally.
Yeah.
Mentors in your life that you can share with us?
Yeah, it's a great point, Rick, and really an important for everyone to think about as they develop their careers. And there are mentors and there are sponsors. Mentors tend to be people who can provide perspectives and help you through different situations and give you advice on your careers. But even within corporations, even more importantly, you need sponsors. You need people who take a vested interest in your career and in your success in that organization. And that happens all the time for people. And if you get into an organization like this and others, and you have your loose network of mentors, that's terrific. You have to make sure that you have actual sponsors. And those are people who are going to go to bat, are going to close the door and say, so deserves an opportunity, and I stand behind them, and I will be there to help them develop. That has gone on since the beginning of time, and it's something that you have to ensure that you are developing as well, and it's a very intentional process.
Yeah. We think back, and Jesus, it almost seems like such a distant part of our past, but the murder of George Floyd, which brought racial inequality and social justice to the forefront in America like I've never seen before. Companies and boardrooms across America have been seeking to lean in and address inequality. Just curious about how you and United have been leading in this way to create what we call at the U.S. Chamber more equality of opportunity.
Yeah, I would tell you, Rick. We've seen opportunities come in the past, and we have seen those opportunities go. We see, the business community and others get um, engaged, in the moment, and then we lose it. Our sense and our hope, and I know that your hope is that this time it's different. And I do feel that way. And most assuredly, that's the way we're approaching it at United Airlines. We are treating diversity, equity, and inclusion as a business imperative. We're putting it right alongside all of our other strategic initiatives, whereas it's not uncommon for it to just be treated as an issue of the day. Now it's time to treat it like it's critically important to the overall success of the business. And as I mentioned before, that goes not only to overall strategies for recruiting people of color, but also making sure the development plans are in place, that introductions for mentors and sponsors and various programs that are supportive for development are in place, but also that promotional opportunities are present and stretch opportunities, and that the company itself is being very deliberate about it and very, very straightforward about being transparent in its interest in ensuring that everyone appreciates that it is a business imperative and that everyone is involved. And at the end of the day, Rick, it also boils down to accountability. Executives at all levels in the company, leaders at all levels of the company have to understand that they're going to be accountable for what we do in this area. And sitting on your hands and not being engaged and not being a leader and helping to bring people through the organization and helping them be successful and helping our overall diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and our objectives just is not acceptable. You have to engage and you have to be accountable.
Yeah, the funniest thing happened, I guess, about a week ago. I was in Nashville and just walking down the street and happened to run into a young brother named Nelson, who told me about he has a young son. He works for a company that was delivering, and he told me that his greatest dream in America was to be an airline pilot. And I said, you got to tune into this conversation, but you at United, I mean, that's not an unreasonable goal for him because of what you've announced to train 2,500 pilots who are women and people of color in the years to come. Tell us a minute about that. But how does Nelson, I mean, he can really make that dream come true. Thank you for what you're doing at United.
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we're going to be hiring up to 10,000 pilots over the next decade. So if you have ever dreamed about or thought about becoming a pilot, it is a fantastic career path. And what we did here at United is we decided that we were going to be very deliberate again about it, and that there was a place in this for our overall diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy. So we bought and we are operating, and we're the only major airline to do so, a flight training center. And we're going to train 5,000 pilots between now and the end of the decade. And what we said is that 50% of those pilots, at the very least, will be women and people of color. So it's a tremendous opportunity to get into this industry. We're providing scholarships and other financial support. We're also providing the certainty that once you were in the program, you are a part of United. So as you're getting your certifications, as you're going through all your training, as you're getting your flight training hours, you are doing it with appreciation for the fact that when you finish that program, you will be on the path to become a pilot at United Airlines. That's a level of certainty and security that hasn't existed in the industry before. But as I mentioned, we have to think in different ways about how to achieve diversity, equity, and inclusion as a way of furthering our overall business strategy.
Yeah. Yeah, so spot on. And clearly, I mean, there's such a partnership role with historically Black colleges and other minority serving institutions to help United reach that goal.
Absolutely.
Bret, I always got sort of I save the most difficult question for last when I get a chance to talk to you. I think the last time I asked you, what do you do for fun? We're talking to students right now across the country, and I want to just leave you with an open-ended question. And it is, when I was a student, I what? Now, you can fill in the blank.
Wow.
But when I was a student at the college or university that you attended, I what? It's all yours.
Yeah, when I was a student, I'll say, at both the college and law school level, I did not have the deep appreciation for the value of relationships in life that I have now. I certainly made great friends. And I pledged to Alpha, my Alpha brothers who I love to this day and spend time with. But I didn't have the appreciation for the broader value of relationships, both with professors and other classmates and in a broader sense. I would suggest that you take time to think about that and nurture those relationships and learn how to nurture those relationships in the right way, because it'll pay off in the future, both on a personal level, but also on a professional level. It's a give and it's a take. So get used to that process and nurture it, and it'll serve you well.
Bret, thanks again, man, for taking time out of your busy schedule, and we know you're busy, to join these students across America. I think you are an example of what we all want to become. And thank you for the inspiration and for sharing your thoughts with us this afternoon.
Always a pleasure, Rick.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me now bring up another amazing next-gen scholar, Julia Asagi, a management consultant and senior analyst at Accenture, a Howard University 2018 graduate, and a proud U.S. Chamber scholar. Julia.
Thank you for that incredible conversation and introduction, Rick. I appreciate everyone for joining this panel today. My name is Julia Asagi. I studied economics and political science at Howard University. And like Rick mentioned, I was in the first cohort of Next Gen interns at the Chamber. Joining us today, we have some bright, incredible students and alumni from premier institutions that will discuss their perspectives on the racial wealth disparity in the United States and the role that these inequities play in entrepreneurship. Our panelists here today are Jada Bourne, a legal communications major, political science minor at Howard University. Hana Adamase, a legal communications major, Afro-American studies minor at Howard University. And Tyler Gray, who has a BA in economics from Harvard University and was also in the first cohort of Next Gen Scholars. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks, Julia.
Of course. So let's get started. According to an article by the Brookings Institution, the average net worth of a white family is $171,000, which is 10 times higher than that of a Black family, which averages just at $17,000. So the article goes on to say that the astonishing wealth gap reveals the effects of accumulated inequality and discrimination, as well as the differences in power and opportunity that can be traced back to this nation's inception. The Black and white wealth gap reflects a society that has not and does not afford equality of opportunity to all its citizens. In conversations about the racial wealth gap, it's important to acknowledge the systemic barriers to true wealth equity. Could you shed some insight on what some of those barriers have been and currently are? We'll start with you, Jada.
Thank you. So I think one of the largest barriers that I'm sure we're all aware of is the inaccessibility to generational wealth. People of color, Black families don't have access to things like land that can be passed down, property that can be passed down, inheritance, business, capital that we can pass on to our families. And it's important to recognize that wealth is cumulative. So when you're always starting at a disadvantage, it's hard to catch up to people who have always been ahead. So I think that's one of the largest barriers that people face today.
Yeah, I want to touch on what Jada was just saying. I agree with everything she just stated. And then, in addition to that, I also believe a couple of the barriers would also be discrimination or lack of the home ownership and wages just in the job services, public programs created to help create wealth and them being broken down, and a couple other things that also may be like contributors of barriers to the racial wealth gap would also be like the racial events that have happened that have broken it down. So examples would be like the Tulsa massacre. It happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, which was also known as Black Wall Street at the time. The systematic wiping of the Freedmen Savings Bank. Also, any like this type of discriminatory legal policies that have been created, such as the Black codes during the Jim Crow era, that would limit opportunities in Southern states. So, such like these would be barriers to the racial wealth gap.
Yeah, and I'll finish just by echoing what both of these ladies have said. And wealth doesn't like generational wealth. That doesn't just mean okay, I have more money in my pocket, or it doesn't just get dwelled down to just money or money in your pocket. That's relationships. That's opportunities. That's money extends so much farther than just being able to say, oh, I have this much more in my bank account. And we talk about those things like the massacre and the Tulsa massacre and the just absolute obliteration of Black Wall Street. Some of those hotels, the Marriott, the Hyatt, some of those large scale hotels today may have been owned by Black families, and the generational effects of that just cannot be measured. I mean, that's the type of thing that can set you back for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Absolutely. You all bring up excellent points that these inequities are generational and that other groups have had several centuries of a head start, and that systemic inequality is often legislated and institutionalized. So as we're experiencing today, we're still facing these inequities. So there's been a lot of political discussion on the best way to reconcile the impact of these systemic barriers that we've mentioned. What are some proposed solutions that you've heard, and what can we stand to gain from them?
I can start with this one. I believe one of the best ways to possibly tackle this situation would be reconfiguration of finance and credit structures of America. From here, we can help Black and Brown people and the minority at the end of the day close this little racial wealth gap that we have. Because at the end of the day, I think I read in an article that even if Black families were to Black families were to have the home ownership equality and like they're able to have those opportunities that white families were also able to have, it would still take over 200 years for home ownership to be for home ownership to help close that racial wealth gap. So at the end of the day, we just need help from just higher people at like I said, reconfiguration on credit structures and such. And then in addition to that, entrepreneurship, because at the end of the day, like you said, generational wealth is something that is passed down. And at the end of the day, like generational wealth is how people have money, people make money. And entrepreneurship, when you own a business and such, you can pass that down onto generations and generations. So it just tops onto the conversation we were just having earlier.
Something that I think we all hear a lot about is a conversation around like reparations. And that's a very nuanced conversation. How would that look? How do you decide who's included in that? What that looks like, how much money, whether it's just money or whether it's other things outside of money. So that's an interesting conversation that, like I said, I think that has a lot of layers to it. And I'm interested to see where that goes in the next couple of years. I think there's been a lot of conversation recently too about voting laws and gerrymandered districts and how we change those up as well. I also think that's kind of like not like just a one-stop quick fix, because another thing we need to do is a lot of times people like to portray voting as if it's the solution to everything, but we know that it's not. And so we need to figure out what we can do to demand more from our politicians and make sure that once they're elected in large part and help to us, that we're holding them to some of the promises they made, and making sure that it's not just kind of like it's not just like performative, and they're actually doing something once they're elected.
Yeah, and I think that we need to think of some legislative solutions specifically around employment equity to close the racial wealth gap. So I think we understand that the racial wealth gap, yes, it's racial, but it's intersectional. So we understand that Black women typically make less than their white male counterparts doing the exact same job. That's a barrier to building wealth because that means you're already at a disadvantage coming in and you remain at that disadvantage as a result of legal discrimination. We need to think about felons who are re-entering society and don't have access to good employment or stable employment because of their criminal records. Those are things that we need to legislatively make priorities because yes, we need reparations. We need to restructure financial and credit. We need a lot of restructuring, but we also need to make sure people are held accountable. When we fix those systems, who's in charge of those systems, who's enacting those, and making sure that they're also making sure that racial wealth disparities and closing that is a priority for them.
Absolutely. As you all have noted, reconciliation is definitely a multi-layered, deep conversation, and it's going to require a creative approach, right? That evaluates all the ways in which we've been systematically disadvantaged, from employment equity to home ownership to criminal justice reform and voting rights, and so on and so forth. But on the topic of entrepreneurship and home ownership, those two are often presented as the best ways to remedy the racial wealth gap, more so now that we're actively recognizing painful events in our nation's history, like the Tulsa and Rosewood massacres, which are just a few of the several documented instances of the intentional destruction of Black homes and businesses. What are your thoughts that entrepreneurship is the key to closing the racial wealth gap? I will start with Tyler.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It's definitely something we talk about all the time. And I think, like you've mentioned, like everyone on the panel has mentioned throughout today, there's not maybe like a one singular key that can close the racial wealth gap, because it's gone so far, it's across generations. But I think entrepreneurship is a great start. And I know I can specifically focus on home ownership as well, because I actually embarked on that myself. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the term house hacking, where you buy a property like a duplex or a multifamily home, and you live in one unit and rent out the other. And if it's your first time purchasing a home, you can finance that through an FHA loan. And what I'm seeing through that, or what I'm learning from my experience, is just how much, if we could get rent if you could get rent out of the way, how much room that gives you to be able to save money, to make more things happen, to be able to connect with other opportunities. I think I read a study maybe a week or two ago that said almost 50% of Americans are rent burdened, which means that you spend over 30% of your income just on rent. And so I lived in New Jersey. I still live in New Jersey. That was me a year ago, where I went 6-8 months. I thought I was working a pretty decent job, and I went 6-8 months without being able to save anything. So I think if I focus specifically on real estate, that is a great way to kind of start to close that gap, especially because it doesn't, like, I didn't go to school and learn anything specifically about that. It's kind of just me doing my own research, talking to peers and talking to people who have done it before. And it's certainly helped me a long way in my journey.
Got you. And on the topic of, beginning entrepreneurial ventures, given the discussion that we've had so far on wealth disparity in the United States, how are entrepreneurs of color disadvantaged regarding their ability to successfully start and run businesses? We'll start with you, Jada.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because entrepreneurship is really important. It's important to have it within your community so that we can circulate the Black dollar there, your communal dollar there. But it's hard to maintain when you don't have anything to start with. Entrepreneurship is a risk, and it's a risk that not everybody has the ability to take, whether that means you don't have capital, you don't have the resources to start that, you don't have the mentorship to start and maintain a business. And I think that Black people and people of color are specifically disadvantaged by that, because it's not something that you see in our communities all the time. We don't have the resources, we don't always have the education, we don't always have the capital to maintain our business through hardships. And that's a really huge barrier to our entrepreneurships and our minority-owned businesses being successful in the long term.
Yeah, basically what Jada was saying, as she mentioned, people don't realize entrepreneurship is more of a luxury than it's credited to be, because at the end of the day, if you're an entrepreneur and you own your own business, you're most likely building your own schedule. You're your own boss. You get to decide when you want to come in, when you don't, what you sell, what your products are, who your customers typically like, what you want your customers to be like. So it's a luxury that not all minority-based people have the opportunity to pursue. And then in addition to that, many Black and Brown entrepreneurs at the end of the day don't receive the same outcomes as white entrepreneurs. And again, it's because of such like capital. Like if you have starting capital, you can do, that's something that aids you with the financial ends of it. What else? There's just so much more. Everything she was saying was correct, but I just wanted to touch on that. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I could add one more thing, I love what Jada said about facing hardships. Uh, I think all the time, I'm sure many of us heard it growing up. Like my parents were always like, "Oh, I wish you could create the next Amazon, or like you could start the next this or this or this or this app or this business." And what a lot of people don't know is Amazon actually almost failed. And Jeff Bezos was able to secure a $200,000 loan from his parents. So going back to like what we were talking about generational wealth and resources, and having people to pull you out of hardships, because most businesses are going to go through hardships. If you're an entrepreneur, you're going to fall on tough times. And if you have those connections or resources to be able to pull you out of there, then that could be the difference in you becoming, like we said, the next inventor of Amazon versus just someone who maybe really had a great idea and just due to hardship, it just kind of failed or it just kind of floated away.
Absolutely. You all bring up such an excellent point that even though entrepreneurship can be very successful, there are still barriers within entrepreneurship, right? Especially as we start to evaluate or look at the availability of startup capital, the ability to assume risk, and the network, right, that some entrepreneurs are afforded and others are not. So last question here. Many of us know entrepreneurs of color, and after the protests of last summer, there's a renewed emphasis on supporting Black and minority-owned businesses. Several of us won't venture to be entrepreneurs ourselves, but in what ways can we support them? We'll start with you, Tyler.
Yeah, so there's a lot of ways you can support. I think I'll start with the ones that don't cost any money. They're free. You can support, I think most, if not all entrepreneurs I know or people I know that are venturing into something that has to do with entrepreneurship. They have social media, whether it's TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. And a lot of times they're posting their content, whether it's the clothes they're selling, the service they're providing, the videos they're creating, the streaming they're doing, they're posting it on these social media sites. And it's absolutely free to retweet someone's tweet or to like their post and share it on Facebook, or to like their post on Instagram, leave a comment, add it to your story. I mean, we're in the generation where so many different entrepreneurs are getting so much more publicity, and we're kind of moving away from the thought process of, the safe way to do it is you go to school, you get your degree, and then you get like a safe corporate job. And that's what the best way to make it out. Like our generation is seeing that there are a lot of other ways to make money, and social media is really helping to fuel this. So the first way I'll say is just support on different social media sites, whatever it is, that's free. Another thing that's free is just emotional support. As Jada mentioned earlier, a lot of times people are going to fall on hardship. I don't know about you guys, but even with your own, if you have a corporate job, there's plenty of times with anything in life where it gets hard and you kind of are like, why am I doing this? What's the purpose of this? You kind of want to quit. You may not be seeing the returns from it. And you just never know how much one conversation can mean to someone. You telling them, hey man, you got a gift, or hey girl, you got a gift, you can't quit, keep going. I know it's tough right now, but I believe in you, you're gonna make it. You just have to keep going. And then the last thing I'll say is one that does cost money. Support them. If your friend has a clothing business, buy some of their clothes. I mean, you don't have to spend $500. You don't have to sell out the entire clothing store, but buy some clothes. If they provide a service, if they're a barber, go get your hair cut by them. Post their stuff and buy it, and don't ask for a discount just because I've known Julia since I was 5 years old, so why should I pay full price for her service? She set the price at what she believes it's valued at, what the market says, and what the effort that it took for her to provide that service. So just support it, and that's something that can also go a really long way.
Incredible. Jada?
Yeah, I can hop in real quick. So I think there are two things that we should really think about in terms of you don't want to be an entrepreneur, how can you support? The first one is time, right? You all have the time to consider a small business first or a minority-owned business first. So if you need a realtor, you need a distributor, if you need to purchase shirts, if you need to purchase cleaning supplies, think about a minority-owned business first. Take the time to research that instead of going to your typical distributor who is already very successful, has a lot of customers, right? We can all take the time to find ways to invest into small-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses. I think the second thing is skill. People think entrepreneurship is a single entity. I by myself can be an entrepreneur. I don't need anything else. That's not how that works. To be an entrepreneur, you need an idea. To execute, you need a team. You need legal resources. You need marketing. You need social media skills. You need everything. And so if you have a skill that you can invest into an entrepreneur, do so. If you can mentor an entrepreneur, do so, because that's going to take their business to the next level. And that's the support people need to maintain a successful business.
Yeah, I think everything that they said is basically saying the same ideas that I had. I think the only thing that I would also add in a way to support entrepreneurs would be, even if you personally can't buy anything from them or you can't support them financially, if you hear somebody talking about maybe like needing to go get a new haircut, or like they need to go buy a new book, or like they're interested in buying something, instead of them most people automatically start thinking going to Amazon or like the big corporate companies. If you can recommend those small businesses, at the end of the day, even that itself, you're not personally buying from them, but you're still sharing their business out with others. You're still spreading the word, and somebody will buy from them. And then especially if they enjoy their product and such, at the end of the day, word goes out. So starting small, even from there, even if it's on social media or just word of mouth, at the end of the day, that's still just going to take somebody's small business to such long ways.
Well, thank you all so much. To everyone's point, it is really important that we gear ourselves and those around us to purchase items from small minority-owned businesses, and to boost visibility and engagement on social media and in person where we can. And also to remember that we're human, so that moral support to entrepreneurs that we know can be just as valuable. And I know that there's so many more questions that we could ask about entrepreneurship and wealth in the United States. But thank you so much to our incredible panelists, Tyler, Hannah, and Jada. And anyone who's listening, if you're a student at a minority serving institution, we recommend that you apply to the Next Gen program by going on the Chamber's website. Next up, we have a panel on education and employment moderated by Virgil Parker, also a Next Gen scholar, and currently working at the Chamber and the Strategic Alliances and Outreach Department. Was a Fulbright scholar and a soon-to-be graduate of Howard University.
Good afternoon, and thank you for tuning in. My name is Latricia Boone. I am Vice President of the Equality of Opportunity Initiative here at the U.S. Chamber. Just want to thank Julia and our Esteem Panel for the conversation we just had on wealth and entrepreneurship, and want to now invite our second panel. I know Julia introduced one of our moderator for our second panel. I want to introduce our second panel and welcome them to the stage. Hello, thank you for joining us. So I want to make sure that we introduce the esteemed panel we have here. We have Amari Phelps, undergraduate student at Alabama Agricultural and Mechanical University, Solomon Morgan, who's an undergraduate student at Howard University, and Rihanna Wilson, who is a graduate of Clark Atlanta University this year, who are all part of our Next Gen business program. So thank you all for joining us. So as we, heard our other panelists really digging in a little bit more, our last panel digging in a bit more on the piece around wealth and entrepreneurship, we also recognize that through our Equality of Opportunity Initiative, there are a lot of other pillars that we focus on, and employment and education is critically important in this space. And so we're going to spend some time today talking about those pieces and really getting your insights. So I'm going to jump right in. So in the essence of time and giving you all a chance to share a little bit of your insights. My first question is really around, as you think about education and employment, but particularly education, what are some successful programs you have seen that better support Black students in school? In your observation, what support do you believe is missing and what is needed? And I'll throw this out to anyone who wants to answer that first question.
So I think a very poignant institution that helps assist in education, or at least assist in students who are trying to achieve a higher education, would be your families, right? You need a strong family system to help guide you through, but that can look like your friends or an accountability group that really supports you through your education. And I think that the role that historically Black colleges and universities play in that field does a great job of providing that familial architecture for students to climb through educations. But in the broader sense, it really depends on community infrastructure and personal development to really guide education.
Thank you, Solomon. That's a great point. I'd love to hear what our other panelists are thinking, and also beyond education, as we think about the experience you all had at the U.S. Chamber through your cohort experience. Even if you talk about the role of business and industry, that would be great too.
Well, I think when speaking on some of the factors that are regarding the discrepancies that exist around graduation rates, I'll speak on two that I believe are most prominent. First being housing, because educational achievement is directly tied to housing and is especially prominent when dealing with poverty. Actually, the Economic Policy Institute found that this educational gap begins before children ever enter school, finding that Black, Hispanic, and Latino students start kindergarten behind in math and reading, and much of this is caused by their social class, which suggests poverty and its associated circumstances. The concentration of Black people in these high poverty areas is not accidental, and it's a direct result of public and private policies. And the segregation of children of color into these high poverty areas obviously affects them because most students go to school in their neighborhoods, and these schools often have lower levels of resources, teacher stability and quality, facilities, and are less likely to benefit from public funding and fundraising. And the second factor that I'll speak on is burdens at home. Students who come from low-income families with high levels of stress and are more likely to drop out. Specifically, though, I would like to address the effects of single Black mothers on students as an example, because Black households have the highest share of women-led households at over 50%, and Black women also face extreme pay gaps, being paid 63 cents to every dollar paid to a white man. So it would take the typical Black woman about 19 months to make what the average white man would make in just 12. Therefore, you have Black women leading these households while facing extreme economic disparities, which places more pressure on the children to help support financially, raising dropout rates, and continuing the cycle of poverty. So I think when we talk about the factors that contribute to discrepancies in graduation rates, these are two prominent factors that need to be addressed.
Thank you. Did you want to add to that?
I guess I could add something. I just want to say I do agree with both Solomon and Rihanna. And, the background and where we come from definitely plays a crucial role in how we advance ourselves when it comes to education and beginning our lives outside of college.
Yeah, Thank you, Amari, and rest of our panelists. So, when we talk about that, you all shared some really, I think, great insights as we think about what are some of the foundational things that are contributing to the discrepancies that we see and the gaps that we see. You all are students at historically Black colleges or graduates or minority serving institutions. What do you see as the role that these institutions play in reducing some of these opportunity gaps in education?
Thank you for that question. I think that's a very poignant thing to ask about the role that they play, especially considering that they do serve a large population of minority students. One thing that I have to mention is that to a certain extent, HBCUs do play a role filling in gaps that may carry over from students' K through 12 education. So it might not be providing them with a full education, but it does give a universal foundation for students to develop their insights further in a higher institution. And it also includes basic things like how to draft a memo or how to properly format an outline for a paper, things that may have been glossed over in high school but are incumbent in a higher learning institution are very prominent in HBCU teaching. So that's one way. Another thing that I have to mention is that HBCUs do such a great job providing a broadcast point, a launching point, a platform for minority students to reach opportunities that they would have considered or could have considered or may have never considered, but now are all of a sudden presented to them and they have an opportunity to achieve that. And this also, plays the same role when it comes to mentors or internships that do a great job providing a cornerstone for career development that you need in a post-grad situation.
Yeah, thank you, Solomon. Those are really great points. And as that kind of takes me to the next question, because obviously HBCUs and minority serving institutions play a huge role in helping to, bring students or scholars from that education space also into career, which also leads to, in our previous conversation, how do you build wealth and opportunity? I want to think about, as we think about companies and our chamber network, especially, what are strategies you all believe that companies can employ to really improve recruitment and retention of HBCU and MSI graduates? And I throw this one out to Amari to maybe start us out with a response to this question.
Yes, thank you for that question. The overall suggestion I would suggest would be to build relationships with the institutions. So for me personally, being at Alabama A&M, it has actually opened the door for me to be able to expand my knowledge on what my career field is. And it actually introduced me to the next gen program that I actually participate in this past summer. And also career fairs do play a crucial role in, getting companies out to the schools and also getting the opportunity to give out internships and touch on that experience and partnerships as well.
Yeah, I'll let any of our other panelists, I don't know if Rihanna or Solomon, you have anything to add there in terms of strategies that you think companies can employ, or just from your own experience, right? Working through the next gen or other experiences, what do you think has been successful in terms of bridging that relationship between companies and HBCUs and, of course, success for graduates of these institutions?
I'll say, speaking to my own experience, because Amari hit the nail on the head, companies and businesses should continue to partner with HBCUs like the Next Gen program. Me specifically, after the end of my internship, I've actually stayed on at the Chamber, and I'm continuing to work in the Global Initiatives Department at the International Affairs Department here at the Chamber. So continuing to give students from HBCUs these opportunities that they may not have had otherwise, continuing to partner with HBCUs, I think is a big deal when it comes to this.
Yeah, thank you for noting that this opportunity led to you having a full-time opportunity, because that is our goal, right? And I think it is because of those early relationships and partnerships that we can create those experiences that lead to full-time and other employment. So thank you for that. I want to throw the next question out to all of you, to all of our panelists, around how has attending an HBCU or even being a part of the Next Gen Scholars Program at the U.S. Chamber opened up doors for you? I know you just touched on that a little bit, Rihanna, but love to hear from our other panelists around how has this opportunity opened doors for you?
I think the biggest door opening would be personal relationships. The people at the U.S. Chamber do a really great job of opening their door and being willing to connect with you. So they always encourage interns when they join to speak to as many people as they can. And doing an internship in a virtual format was even more of a blessing in that regard. But connecting with people, learning how to communicate with people, developing a personal network. These have been the fruits of connecting with the chamber through a program like Next Gen, which is the fruit of a program that connects Howard University and the U.S. Chamber. So following in the blueprint of Next Gen is sure to bring more, talent, more personal acquisitions to the forefront for businesses.
Thank you, Solomon. Does anyone else want to chime in here? Okay, I will move us to our next question. Is again, we're thinking about employment and unemployment as in this space and what that actually means. There's statistics out there. For example, the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis shares that Black unemployment rates have generally been twice as high as white Americans for over the past 4 decades. And so we know that there is an issue with unemployment, but we also know in this moment that there's a worker shortage. And so I see that almost as opportunities for companies, but also opportunities for communities that have traditionally been disconnected from the workspace. Would anyone want to chime in on, just from your research and your experience and working in this space, what do you think are opportunities for companies beyond just the connections with HBCUs, which is really important in minority serving institutions, but what are other strategies that you think companies could think about and employ as they are looking to diversify their pipeline and also help to alleviate some of the unemployment that we see, and particularly in communities of color?
I guess I would start off. I would suggest restructuring the job application. As a criminal justice major, much of my education here, what I've been learning, has dealt with the rate between unemployment with Black Americans, specifically when it comes to men and felonies and misdemeanors. And I would suggest companies, instead of looking at just what's on the paper, actually get to know the applicant. Oftentimes the applicant could be the person that has the top skill set, in the company, or knows more than what everybody else knows, and it could be a good asset to the company, but could be turned away just because of his previous criminal history. So I would suggest restructuring the application, getting to know the applicant, looking past that, because at the end of the day, we're all Americans. We're still in a pandemic. Unemployment rates are high. Even from my experience working right now in retail, there's hiring signs everywhere. So I would just say restructure, get to know the person, because at the end of the day, you never know what that person could bring to your company.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Amari. And I know you and others have heard of the work that we are doing here at the U.S. Chamber to really help our network think about second chance hiring as a recruitment strategy. And I think that's what you're hitting on a little bit, but there's definitely opportunity as we think about the workforce shortage. And again, helping to close some of those opportunity gaps that exist. So I want to move us forward just a little bit and kind of in some ways encapsulate a little bit of this conversation. And this question is for all of our panelists here. What suggestions do you have for the students and business leaders who are tuned in today in terms of the role that they can play in helping to remove barriers around education and employment? And we'll start with Rihanna, then we'll go to Solomon and Amari.
Yeah, I think that the business community should do what they're doing now. For one, continue to listen to voices that are most affected, continue to educate themselves and hear what can be done, what strategies can be done, because raising levels of education and narrowing skills gaps for people of color will increase competitiveness and position the country as a whole to take advantage of a more diverse and skillful workforce. So I think that they should continue to do their research, to educate, to listen to the to the strategies that we set forth and implement them in their companies.
Thank you. Solomon.
I think one thing that, is starting to come back to the forefront, and, companies can add this to their tool belt, is getting physically on campus, providing students with the opportunity to see your company in person, see the kinds of things that you are interested in or the kinds of things that you want to allow for other people to do with the opportunities that you give them. Those are ways that students engage with companies. And for students, just research things in your field, find things that might be outside of your comfort zone, and then use the resources at your institutions to bring them into your field of vision.
And finally, I would suggest, investing in the community partnerships, scholarships, anything that could get the company name out there, and that also bring, power to your company and also help out the community as well.
Yeah, thank you all. I think those nuggets, and I'll just to kind of summarize them, but really it's about, thinking innovatively on the company and business side, encouraging students themselves to know what resources exist out there and get involved and active. And then, of course, for companies, again, it's also about how you get on campuses and build those partnerships and relationships. I know that's work that we are consistently talking about at the Chamber and supporting our network to do. And just excited that those opportunities have allowed us to have students like yourself who have such great perspective and voices. And again, our future business and policy leaders. So I want to thank you all for this enlightening conversation today and for being part of our Next Gen program. And we're looking forward to continuing to support your leadership and growth in this space. So thank you. I am going to now turn it over to our next speaker who's going to close us out, Ryan Duff, who is a candidate for Juris Doctorate at Howard University Law School, who is going to help close us out. But thank you all for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for attending this extremely informative event. I think it has been so amazing so far as we amplify young and informed voices. And I encourage everyone to continue to come out to these types of events. I know our cohort plans to host as many as we can so that we can continue learning from each other. My name is Ryan Duff. Currently, I'm a 2L at Howard University School of Law. I'm also an alumnus of Howard University, and I graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Economics and Political Science in 2018. This summer, I was very fortunate to begin my relationship with the Chamber as the first ever legal reform fellow with the Institute for Legal Reform here at the Chamber. I especially wanted to thank all of our panelists and speakers today for helping us begin this conversation and how navigating entrepreneurial challenges and how difficult that is sometimes for Black students, Black and brown students. As students attending historically Black colleges or universities, we are particularly sensitive to the disadvantages minority students face in gaining access to new career opportunities, especially those that promote entrepreneurship, business leadership, and trade. I thought it was really interesting when the last panelist spoke about supporting HBCUs because of the familial architecture that it provides for our student employees. I think it's so interesting as well the way HBCU students really have been attacking the business industry with creative and innovative ideas and solutions. I especially want to thank the Chamber for giving us this platform so that we can discuss these issues and continue to advocate towards the improvement of opportunities for HBCU business students. I think it's incredibly important that established organizations utilize their resources to support the inclusion of diverse members in business, because as we know, this improves the quality of services that we can provide for our clients. I think it's also important that we support Black entrepreneurs as they have been extremely creative and innovative in creating solutions that we can definitely use in our daily lives. Lastly, I'd like to thank you, our guests, for attending this informative event. Through the Chamber's Equality of Opportunity Initiative, we are actively developing and advancing solutions that help close race-based opportunity gaps, especially for our small and growing diverse businesses. Thank you again for joining us today. Please visit uschamber.com to find out more about the Equality of Opportunity Initiative and learn more about how you can partner with or engage with the chamber as they continue to build an inclusive economy and realize true progress for the business community of our nation. I think you should also reach out and connect with the panelists today. These have been amazing students who are leaders at their respective universities and budding entrepreneurs ready to attack the problems of the business community of tomorrow. Connect with us on LinkedIn again. And again, my name is Ryan Duff. Thank you all for coming, and we really appreciate your support in this venture. Thank you.